Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you with us. My name's Pete Horsley. I'm the founder of Remarkable. Welcome to Remarkable Insights. Remarkable is a division of Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and we have the backing of iCare, Telstra, and Microsoft. And Remarkable's mission is really to harness innovation and technology for the purpose of inclusion of people with disability. We do this mainly through our tech accelerator. It's a 16-week accelerator where we support early stage startups creating new technologies. And we do that through seed funding, through knowledge, through our mentor network, and introducing them to investors, trying to get them to that point of having sustainable businesses that are making an impact. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land. I'm on Guringai land of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge that they've been the original innovators. They were the original entrepreneurs who have cared for our land for so long. Today's conversation, Designing for Inclusion in eSports, is part of Remarkable Insights. We know that there's significant opportunity to be able to leverage technology and innovation for the purpose of inclusion. But rather than thinking about what that's going to be like in the future, we want to bring the future into now, to understand what are the insights that we can understand to bring that inclusive future into now. For anyone who's following us on socials, please use our handles on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn, which is @RemarkableTech. If you're on Instagram, you can use remarkable_tech, and please use the hashtag #RemarkableInsights. Special thanks also to GoToGames, who have been partnering with us on this edition of Remarkable Insights as well. And lastly, this event has live captioning. That's available to you through AI Media. You should see that. You should be able to turn that on below. And also special thanks to our Auslan interpreter, Tyson. Thank you, Tyson. We'll be recording this event, so if you did miss out on this or you want to share this with someone else, please go onto our YouTube channel and you can catch up on that as well. On today's topic, just a little bit of background for those who might not be as familiar with eSports. So eSports describes really the world of competitive gaming organised online. And last year eSports took in around about $1.1 billion, but the industry is set to grow at about 24% per year. Before pandemic, esports competitions were packing out stadiums all over the world, and quite significant and growing prize money as well. The Netflix CEO is more worried about the growth in esports than he is about other streaming platforms. And we're seeing games like The Last of Us Part 2 on PS4 have around about 60 accessibility options built into the game, and it's been termed one of the most accessible games ever. Then in 2018, Microsoft brought out their Xbox Adaptive Controller, opening up the gaming platform to a range of new players. So we're going to get into where this is heading. Is this all just kind of some well-meaning kind of woke companies, or is there a trend that's happening here? And today we are joined by an incredible panel, and I want to introduce them briefly to you. We have Steve Spon, who's the COO of the Able Gamers. We have Ellen Urich, who is Narrative and Game Director from Blowfish Studios. And we have Humphrey Hanley, our Creative Director at No Hands, No Excuses. And we'll get to know each of our panelists as we go as well. Welcome to you all.
Thanks, Pete.
Hey, thank you.
So Steve, let's start with you. Take us back and tell us a little bit, tell us briefly about kind of your story about your entry into esports. How did you get into esports?
Well, I've been a gamer since the late 80s, early 90s, back when my family could afford an Atari. We found at a random thrift shop with a whole bunch of games, and it was outdated as heck, but I really wanted to do something fun and innovative for the time, and my mom decided that that was a good way to get me to do something that all the other kids were. So she got me my Atari, and that's how I ended up getting into to beginning the slope of forever being a gamer. So for it's a long journey, but I don't particularly play esports as much as I just play regular games. Esports, you really got to be earning a living being good at video games, and anybody who plays games with me, just ask Humphrey, knows I'm trash. So I at least get to enjoy playing some video games recreationally, and more importantly, helping able gamers make everyone be able to play games.
And we'll get you to tell us a little bit about Able Game. Or actually, just tell us a little bit about Able Gamers now, actually, if you can, Steve.
Sure. So Able Gamers is a 501c3 nonprofit charity in America that's creating opportunities that enable play in order to combat social isolation, foster inclusive communities, and improve the quality of life for people with disabilities. We do that in a number of ways, but primarily it is by helping people get the controllers that they need free of cost with our peer support, and helping the industry itself become a better place at designing video games for people with disabilities in mind.
It's awesome. And I've been following the work of Able Gamers and looking on with admiration for a number of years now. So well done. And Humphrey, give us a little bit of context about you. Tell us about how you kind of got into gaming, but also what made you kind of land on your gamer tag of no hands, no excuses?
Kia ora, Pete. Thank you. Well, funny story that. When did I get into gaming? I guess probably, by the sounds of it, about the same time Steve did. For me, it was the Amiga 500 rather than an Atari. But yep, similar sort of thing. It was a way for me to be involved in something my peers were and be able to keep up or be better than them at it. And fast forward a few decades to 2017, I was recovering from surgery and started making content about my recovery, and in searching for a name, I somehow or other realized that not having hands was going to be part of the brand. So yeah, No Hands, No Excuses was born, and the gaming of No Hands NZ became a reality.
And what is it? I guess it sounds like we know what it means, but give us your interpretation of kind of the no excuses part.
To me, it's just about making sure that, in spite of my obvious disability difficulties, fragile skin, and a lack of fingers for pushing all the buttons and doing all the things, that isn't an excuse for not getting out there and making the most of things. And the idea behind that is to then encourage and motivate and hopefully, inspire other people to make the most of what they can do with 10 fingers or without, whatever they're working with.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. And Ellen, you've been in the gaming industry for more than 10 years now. And you've been kind of mostly involved in the kind of creative, the narrative kind of creation, content side of things and game experiences. Mm-hmm. Where have you seen the industry head over that time around accessibility and diversity broadly? And then also give us a little bit of an understanding on your personal experience around accessibility in gaming as well.
Yeah, so I think overall, especially in the last few years, we've seen a huge increase in a change of perception from the games being very much for a key audience that is able-bodied and young and assumed to be predominantly male and highly competitive, to then being more inclusive, being more global. That's another thing that's changed with the technology. And, you know, look at us, we're all around the world coming in and talking here. We can now all play with people all over the world. But yeah, just from a general perspective, not necessarily disability focused per se, but in terms of the representation of different types of people, in the storytelling and in the characters in the games as well, we've seen a huge shift. My personal experience is as more of an admirer of esports, and that kind of comes down to about, I think it was about 5-ish years ago, I got a diagnosis of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a form of dysautonomia. So that is, you know, tachycardia is in the title, so heart palpitations. Other symptoms were things like brain fog and generally not coping well with high pressure situations. So even though I kind of still had to participate in life and in my work and making sure that I was on top of things, in a play situation or in a, you know, a game and leisure situation, I found that those sorts of high pressure games were just not something that I could participate in, you know, compared to other people. So even though I'm able-bodied, that's still kind of, that type of gameplay is something that I think is very important to think about as well, because there are so many types of disabilities or accessibility requirements that, you know, we need to be thinking about as game developers ourselves as well.
And I think we're going to get into that a little bit later with Steve as well in some of the questions. And Humphrey, you were recently asked the question if you see people continuing to try to climb their way up through the competitive ranks in traditional esports tournaments, or is there room and interest for creating a fully inclusive tournament that includes kind of brackets or different categories for different types of disability? Do you want to kind of talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, it was a question posed to me, and I don't necessarily have all the answers for it, but I think it's a really important question. When we look at any sport, whether it's an esport or a physical getting out there and doing it sport, how do we find a way to be inclusive at the same time as looking at whether or not, you know, do we compete amongst ourselves, or do the adaptations that we can access make us competitive enough to compete with people with 10 fingers? And in that, does that then, you know, like Blade Runners competing in the regular Olympics, does that make other people feel like we actually end up with an advantage? It's a difficult situation, and I don't necessarily have the answer, but I'd like to see people actually trying one or the other, at least, out there in tournaments. You know, at the moment, there's pretty much just nothing in that regard.
Steve, do you have an opinion on that one?
You know, esports and disability has been something that have been talked about and discussed in numerous circles in the industry behind closed doors and open forums for as long as I can remember. As always, when I do these things, I always say, you know, the problem is that I've got at least a dozen golden robots sitting in my closet waiting for me to say the wrong thing to come beat me down if I try to break an NDA. So I have to be careful what exactly I say, but I can tell you that discussions happen and that esports is something that I can see in the future for the disability community, and it's something that I think we just have to figure out, as Humphrey was saying, the right way to do it. There are obvious obstacles that must be overcome. There are going to be spoil sports that turn very quickly from accessibility is stupid to that person had an advantage, how dare they? And it, you know, that flip is going to be hard and quick, and we know it. So we got to be ready for it. We got to be ready with answers, and we really have to get the public on our side. We have to let everyone out there know that you need to be standing behind players with disabilities so that they feel like they have your support.
It's brilliant. Well, it sounds like watch this space a little bit, which is good. Ellen, beyond the kind of commentary that we hear around, you know, and what you spoke about before of it's so global and it's actually by its nature then more accessible, particularly for people with disabilities. Do you think that on the whole the games industry is becoming more inclusive, or do you feel like it is just kind of a select number of companies that are kind of moving in that direction?
I feel like it's a select number of companies that aren't moving in that direction. I think a very important thing to remember is how large the indie development scene is. So even though there are these key players that are publishers and AAA developers, there are so many indie developers that are looking specifically to create games that have different levels of accessibility and are trying different types of gameplay and showing and depicting different types of characters. So to me, it is more something that, yeah, there's a small number of people or a small number of companies that I think are more resistant to that. And that does come from, I kind of blame the business perspective of saying, well, we're targeting to the largest known group of paying players. And unfortunately, some of these groups tend to be very toxic as well, not only to other players, but to the companies themselves as well. You get a huge difference in the fan response to sort of indie game developers when they say we need to delay our game versus a AAA developer that says we need to delay our game. So I think, you know, I feel very positive about the types of games that we're going to see in the future. Yeah.
What about you, Humphrey or Steve, on that one? Do you see the games industry kind of as a whole headed in a certain direction, or from your perspective, are you seeing only certain companies doing this?
Good.
Steve, I think you've got way more insight into the background of a lot of that than I do. But from my experience, I've got to agree. It's a select few who aren't embracing it and heading in that direction. I think the days of social media help us. You know, it means that if something does come out that isn't accessible, we've got much quicker avenues to reaching out to developers and to people and saying, hey, look, you've done this, whether it was by intent or accidental lack of thinking about it, then this is the barrier to the game that people like myself and Steve face. Can you fix it? And sometimes you get people actually responding and reacting to that in a positive way. But as you said, sometimes the toxic community is the toxic community.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, as my friend No Hands was saying, the real problem is that there are a few who are not coming along. I often like to make social media jokes that Nintendo don't do accessibility. And it's just the thing right now. Killing NZ live on camera. But the thing is that they all could, right? And they're all coming along in their own ways. You know, Xbox coming out with a controller, PlayStation allowing system-wide accessibility options, Nintendo has a Pikachu. But you know, generally, we need to work and continue to work together on this. As far as that, the best anecdote I can give you is, you know, 12 years ago when Able Gamers was just a tiny fledgling organization. You know, I was on the floor of PAX, which is a huge organizational gamers coming together, 72,000 of us all hanging in one building, checking out all the latest games and equipment. And, you know, walking up to a place like Rockstar that makes things, you know, that y'all have heard of, like a lot of the Noirs, Max Payne, etc., they just kind of brushed us aside. You know, why are you here? Why are you bothering us? Took our flyer, crumpled it up, threw it away. And now you have those same companies coming to us asking us for advice on how do we do this? How do we design better? You know, can you know, get us into your certification course so that we can teach our developers how to do this from the get-go? You know, and so now there's a business that can support a charity for letting developers be able to design accessibly. So, you know, it's come full circle from us having to badger people to, you know, all kinds of golden robots in my house waiting to beat me down.
So we've got a similar question to that from our audience. So by the way, if you are watching and you'd like to ask a question of our panel, please do so in the Q&A section by clicking the button below. We've got a question there from Eloise Cleary asking, how do you think we could go about encouraging the select few gamers who aren't embracing accessibility to do so? So yeah, I'm interested in that kind of change, Steve, that you just talked about. What was the change that kind of that caused them to start thinking this way?
I really believe it's threefold. One, able gamers, we are all persistent as heck. We just will not go away no matter how bad people wished we would. And persistence of beating down doors was really how we got our foot in. And I will say, and I will acknowledge, not everybody in the accessibility space approved of our methodology. You know, some people thought we were too aggressive with demanding people be accessible and demanding accessibility options, but people were not hearing us. And so we went out and we made them have to pay attention to the disability community. Two, social changes. The world continues to be progressive. No matter what side of your country political parties are doing and who's doing what, as a whole, the entire world continues to march forward. We become more accepting about disability. We become more understanding, more compassionate towards groups of people. And three, the business case really became prominent. You know, we had people like Chris Powers, our vice president, come along from Prince Edward Island University who could take these things that, you know, Mark Barley and I have been talking about for years, like, hey, you guys should really do this, please. And he got to actually put it into white papers and say, listen, not only should you, but there's a business case here. You know, there are 42 million players with disabilities in America alone. I wish I had the numbers for Australia on me, but there, from there, it just continues to go up and up and up to a billion. We all want to play games. We all have various disabilities, and they can be paid attention to in a way that is not toxic, in a way that conforms. You can have options that don't hurt anyone. And I think the industry finally started to see that we were allies and not the people trying to police what they're doing.
That's brilliant. That's great. I read a quote by Bryce Johnson, the co-inventor of the Xbox Adaptive Controller, and he said, "We believe that when you do not intentionally, deliberately include, you will unintentionally exclude." So where are the gaps? It's sounding all quite rosy right now from what you've been talking about. Gaming industry kind of headed in this direction, but where are the gaps? And let's kind of think broadly on this. So think the eSports themselves, the hardware, the events, the sponsors, accommodation. And I'd like to hear from all three of you on this one.
I'll go last. I talk too much.
Go, Ellen.
I think from my perspective, I'd like to see more esports that are less Twitch based, if that makes, not Twitch the platform, but like Twitch response based. So quick time responses. I'd like to see things that require planning and thought and turn-based things, because I think that would help a lot of people, whether you're able-bodied or not, whether you have issues with brain fog like I did, or whether you're just getting older. You know, there's a reason that even professional soccer players kind of end their career at like 35. It's because as you get older, you get your responses slow down. The other side of it is, I know that there are studies done that have negatively correlated competitive behavior with age as well. So moving away from those highly competitive, maybe towards collaborative, and quick response towards planning might end up opening things up to a lot more people, not only from you know, a disability perspective, but even age perspective, and you know, move away from that ideal of the 17-year-old white male able-bodied highly competitive aggressive gamer that is so kind of idealized in this.
Yeah. What about you, Humphrey?
So I mean, I totally agree. I'd love to be able to participate in things that, you know, weren't just reflex 10 finger, can you hit all the buttons, at exactly the right moment based. I totally get, though, that is where the competitive nature of these things comes, and where they feel the sport lies in these sorts of things. But I think a lot of what I've heard from people out there that are trying to get in as competitive gamers, there aren't so many barriers necessarily from tournament organizers. Tournament organizers, if you've got the gear and you want to come along and connect your gear up and have a go, generally speaking, they're going to be okay with that. But the problem is, your average disabled gamer can't just chuck on a backpack, hop on a bus, go to the nearest backpackers and stay at a convention for 3 days or whatever the tournament is. Our costs increase dramatically the minute we've got to bring support staff. We can't just stay in backpackers and things like that. There isn't even necessarily accessible accommodation around some of these venues, as much as venues themselves these days try and be accessible. And then not only that, but you look at things like the ability for a person with a disability to reach out to a potential sponsor and say, hey, I want to get involved in this. Will you back me? Will you help me? Even if there is sort of an entry fee, that's only designed to cover the bare, cheapest minimum of travel kind of thing. And that immediately throws up barriers to people with disabilities that want to come along to these things. I mean, I've found it myself as a speaker, having been invited to come and speak at events, and then saying, well, okay, but how much can you help me with travel costs? And the only money available to travel costs is that get on a plane, sit in the cheap seats, and stay at a cheap hotel, and I have to turn them down because that's just not enough to feasibly get me a medical assistant and the kitchen sink to wherever the event is going on. And so I think building that awareness around these things and going, actually, it's not just opening a door. You've got to put in that extra effort to make it accessible culturally, physically, and socially.
Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, echoing everything my co-panelists are saying here, the thing about esports and players with disabilities is that it's already happening. You look at people like Mike Beecham, known as Broly Legs. He literally plays by holding a controller up to his face in order to play a game. So imagine literally smashing an Xbox controller into the side of your head and being able to whoop people's butts. Matter of fact, Able Gamers sponsors him every year to go get into tournaments, not this year because of the world fires, but in general, sponsoring him. And last year he took 6th place in the world in Street Fighter, playing with his face. It's out there. There are people who are representatives of this great community out there and doing the things and showing that it can be done. The main problem right now is that, yes, number one, it's not feasible for a lot of us to do this because of added expenses, but also they don't care, and they're not going to care, and there's nothing we're going to do to make them care, right? And at the end of the day, you got to ask yourselves, should it be their responsibility to care? Well, they're producers, right? They're producing content. So here's what we have to do. We have to get to the point where society eases that burden. We have to have it where medical expenses include things like e-games and esports in their insurance. Have it be something where if you are someone who's trying to chase this as a sports, why doesn't vocational rehabilitation pick up the bill for you to go get on these things? Why do you not have sponsors who say, okay, well, the tournament's not going to pay for you, but we will. You just have to wear this jersey that says gsportsefuel.com all over your face, tattoo it on your butt, whatever the hell they ask. I don't know. And that is how they pay the bills. And we've got to get a point where we have people honestly and truly intrigued. And it's not just a niche convention or a panel, as great as these are, we all have to admit that we've all seen, 100 of these. where there's 50 to 100 deeply empathetic, caring individuals who care about this topic. We need the mass public to care. We need to find those charismatic individuals who can go out there, captivate some audiences, and go, oh crap, that guy's actually pretty funny. That lady is amazing. That person is awesome. And I want to follow them. And I think you're starting to see it. There are people on Twitter who have a following, on Facebook, on Instagram. You're starting to see it. It's taken some time, but I think you'll only see it continue to grow from here.
I think you're right as well. And there's a couple of things, a couple of threads that kind of came through some of your responses then. This kind of idea of kind of who bears the cost. I think you talked about that, Humphrey, of, you know, who bears the cost of that accessibility. So, you know, no doubt the accessible controller might be affordable for lots of people, for some maybe not as well. But what are your thoughts on kind of specific adaptive technologies that you might have to use versus those things that are just naturally kind of built into games? Any of the panel can respond to this one.
So you're saying like options that aren't necessarily built into the game, but they just sort of are on the host almost to add these kind of things?
Yeah, because I guess sometimes the cost, I mean, we had the example at our last Remarkable Insights where we were talking about, you know, these incredible stair climbing wheelchairs and they're fantastic, but hey, like who bears the cost of actually buying that stair climbing wheelchair? Like, why can't we just have a ramp that's kind of put in that allows everyone access to that building? And so this kind of idea of who is bearing the cost of kind of building in these accessibility features, who's having to bear the extra cost of bringing their carer along or a support worker along. I'm interested in kind of just hearing your reflective responses on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we were saying in the last segment, I think that it comes down to a combination of insurance, sponsors, and the least of all should be on the hosting event themselves. Now, that answer won't necessarily be popular with a lot of people because, you know, it's much more convenient for me to sit here and say, yes, PAX should absolutely pay for me to go compete in Omega Knots, but that's not reality. They're never going to do that, right? They can get somebody much cheaper and much funnier than me for, you know, a lot less resources. So they can do it out of the goodness of their heart. But we learned that lesson over the last decade. When you rely on people to do what's good from their hearts, some people will do it. The majority, maybe not so much. So, you know, you got to incentivize. So you got to have either a bar minimum of inclusion of diverse people. You need men, women, people, folks. You need, you know, of all different backgrounds, shapes, and sizes who should be at these things. And when that doesn't happen, it needs to be the people that hold their feet to the ground. We need our fans out there saying, yeah, that was great, but your panel was all white, able-bodied, straight people. What the hell? And you need people out there who are willing to make noise and willing to come by and say, listen, you got all your check marks, congratulations, but also like you let the people with disabilities sit off stage off in the corner and you weren't even really part of the panel. So we again need people to continue to step up and continue to make noise whenever these things are done. They're injustices and they need to be called out as such.
Yeah. Any other responses from the other panelists? I know we're running a little bit short of time, but.
I mean, absolutely just echo what Steve said, except I think they'd be hard pressed to find people funnier than him. It does come down to, for me, what is the priority? You know, if these events are inviting me to speak and offering funding for an average speaker, if they're inviting me to speak, they should be acknowledging that that's how much, you know, that they're willing to be absorbing some of that cost of what it takes to have someone like myself or Steve come to an event like that. But also by the same token, you know, if we're good at what we do, if people enjoy what we do, if we're winning, especially at what we do, We need brands out there willing to properly sponsor and, you know, back us for these sorts of things. And at the end of the day, I think we're moving in the right direction at the moment, but I think there is still quite a long way to go. I mean, I've done some stuff with Xbox with their adaptive controller, and also with Logitech, who created a bunch of switches at an affordable price for the adaptive controller. And those two things combined could make an event accessible for a lot of people that previously wouldn't have been able to. And that's not necessarily at much more of a cost than your average pro gamer buying a really fancy mouse and keyboard combination.
Yeah. We've got some questions coming in on Q&A as well. So Jonathan Prosser has asked, fast forward 10 years, do you think it'll be the case that esports will be ahead of sport in terms of accessibility or not?
By very nature of what they are, yes. There is no other sport in the world that is more accessible to people with disabilities. Listen, I don't care what you give me short of an Iron Man suit. I'm not going to be out there catching passes from anybody but Tom Brady. Like, it's just not going to happen. There are limits to what you can do. And I think that's been part of the secret of Able Gamers' success, is we have never gone out into the world and promised that anybody can play any game. That's not realistic. We promise you that we can play more games that you have available to your playing desires with controllers and with the right setup. Therefore, you'll have a more expansive library of content to enjoy. That's what we can promise you. We can't promise you can do everything. So it doesn't matter how much money you throw at me. If we literally sell Humphrey on the open market right now, it doesn't matter. Like, we'll get millions of dollars, but we're not going to be able to put somebody in a suit if they are quadriplegic and all they can use is their mouth to play games, right? So on the flip side of that, for $300 US, I can put that same gamer in an eSports tournament, and they might just kick your butt and take the whole thing. So I think, yes, the answer is unequivocally yes. Esports will be the way for people with disabilities in the future.
That's awesome. So we've got a couple of questions that have come from the audience as well. We have Eloise asking, what's your vision for the future of inclusive gaming? Ellen, do you want to give us your vision for inclusive gaming?
Yeah, so I think Naughty Dog have done a really great thing in having those, 40 or 60 accessibility options, because they do highlight things like, you know, I mean, the easy one is color blindness, and that there are several types of color blindness, and, you know, being hard of hearing, you know, but there's so many more. I haven't even looked at them, but there are so many different options for ways you can play the game. The input complexity, how hard it is to actually input, you know, why not have the QuickTime event just be one button that you press rather than the right button? Do you have to complete the QuickTime event? Things like that, that help you experience the game how you want to experience it, regardless of who or, you know, who you are, where you are, what you're bringing to the table. For esports, as I said, I would love to see a huge range of things. I would love to make Netflix really scared, or Netflix, maybe you can start a channel where you're broadcasting esports and feature people from different walks of life, you know, different levels of ableness, have different leagues, or all together leagues have more fun things versus competitive things like that. I would love to see that and really normalize it. And you know, I'd love to hear from my fellow panelists as well about how you'd like to see those sorts of broadcast mainstream, I'm losing my words now, mainstream broadcast events of these sports. I would love to see and hear about how you'd like to see them.
Anyone
Go
else
ahead,
want?
no hands.
So I would love, obviously, to see more participation from disabled gamers in all sorts of events. I think one of the big ones, as you said, like if there were channels and more mainstream broadcasts of events going on, I think mainstreaming the inclusion of people with disabilities at all levels of these things. And to me, that maybe starts with inviting people like Steve or myself to host some of these events, especially in virtual scenarios. I think to lead back to the main question about where is the way forward with a lot of this, to me, we're on the right path. I think one of the key things about continuing on this path is the inclusion of people with disabilities in being part of the solution, not designing solutions that people without disabilities think we need. I think that is one of the biggest things that happens that to any diverse minority community, that those that aren't the minority think they know what we need and think they know how to do that without us. And I think therein a lot of the mistakes, and that's where a lot of the scenarios you talked about earlier, what Bryce mentioned, where, you know, if you don't design with inclusion in mind, you inadvertently exclude. Well, the only people that really understand how that works are the people that need it in the first place.
Yeah, I've got so many questions coming in. We've probably only got time for one more. I really like this one that's just come in. How do we encourage young people, 12 to 18 years, but I guess any young person, both with a disability and without a disability, who are gamers, to start to take action to change the industry?
You become an advocate. You start advocating for what you're passionate about. If you want to be the change, then you have to be the change. If you want to see the change, you sometimes have to be the change. It all comes back to you. Something that I really wish I could get to resonate in the public, which I'm still gonna keep ramming it home if I have to, is that you don't always see the change that happens in the world, but you always change the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not changing anything if you're not seeing it. You may be. You probably are. You just may not see it. So I think there needs to be more Ellens in the world who just take up the mantle of advocate when they find out that they are part of the disability community. I think you need to find more people like No Hands who find themselves suddenly in a situation where they are amongst our crew and now therefore they are one of us. And I think people who are able-bodied need to realize that you are one last good day away from being a member of the disability community, because it's the easiest club to join and it's the hardest one to get out of. So until we start seeing these brands come around and realize that my disabled dollar spends just as well as your able-bodied dollar, and then we're going to keep coming back here. So you want to change the world, kids? Go change the world. Simple as that.
That's awesome. Well, I can see why South by Southwest chose you as this year's Game Industry Champion of Change, Steve. So congratulations on that. And we're sorry to hear that you didn't get to give your speech in March this year because of COVID. But yeah, incredible work. And I just love that, that you might not see the change, but you are making change. I love that. That's fantastic. We've sadly run out of time. We could probably go another hour on this one, I think, with some of the questions that are coming in. I really want to thank Go2 Games, our event partner this time. To Tyson, thank you so much for Auslan interpreting. Thank you, and and most of all to our panelists, to Steve, to Ellen, and to Humphrey as well. We thank you for your incredible insights and your incredible words. Maybe just one last thing. I want to, today's all about insights. So we want those that are viewing today to kind of walk away with some insights in terms of how we can create a more accessible and inclusive gaming industry. I just wanted to, from each of you, super quick, because we've only got like 2 minutes left, but super quick on what's one insight that you'd like to leave everyone here today, or what's one insight on creating inclusive gaming communities? Any of you want to jump in quickly?
We're all thinking. One insight. I think the most important thing of all is to never assume that those around you are not going through struggles, and never assume that you are the only one, the first one going through struggles. You may be the first one of your specific kind of struggle, but there will be other people going through struggles. Ask anything that you want to depict, show, explore, share, advocate for. Talk to people, find them, hear their stories, and work with them to increase sharing about everything that we go through in life.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Alan.
Well, I'll jump in and let Steve go last, seeing as he says he can talk the most. I think one of the best ways for us to be really promoting inclusivity is to encourage brands and events and everyone out there that creates social media, creates content, creates anything, to be creating it accessibly. You know, it's fantastic to be on this panel and have sign language interpretation going on as we talk, to have captions going on as we talk. It's something I try and push for with any brand I work with, that if they want to make some content, we've got to make it accessible. And that means people get to be part of the conversation. You know, they get to be included in all these things that are going on, not just be invited to events, but to feel part of communities.
Absolutely. Steve?
Take action today. There will never be a good time. The world will always be on fire. There will always be another tragedy. There may not be another pandemic in your lifetime, but there will be another thing that you can say to yourself, now's not the right time. Go out there and do the thing that you think you don't have time for right now. The best insight that I can give you is that there is an invisible clock above your head, and it's ticking. And every decision you make every day of your life changes the time on that clock, but it's still going to keep on ticking no matter what you do. And when it runs out, your time on this marble is over. And it's not a comfortable thing. It's not something that most able-bodied people want to think about. But at the end of the day, we all have an expiration date. We all have to meet our maker one day. And your day may be sooner than you think. So start living like disabled people who have accepted that life is short and fragile and it needs to be cherished. Do something today so you don't regret leaving it undone tomorrow.
Brilliant.
Some of us have already gone past our expiration dates.
Well, if this topic has really sparked an interest in you, if you're in this space already and you're working on it, I know we had a shout out from the Takuma guys who are working on some accessible controllers as well. If this area is of interest to you, obviously check out Able Gamers. Also, Remarkable is running a design challenge in October this year as well. And eSports is one of the 3 challenges that we've put up. And we'd really love to see people addressing this area of accessibility in eSports. We've got about $30,000 in prize money up for grabs to help develop these ideas further. And so please jump onto remarkable.org.au/events, and you can have a look at the designathon from there. So Remarkable Designathon. Registration's free, so you can have a look at that right now. Also, we'll be seeking your feedback on today's panel as well. So we'd love if you could give us some feedback after this. And also just a reminder that this recording's being made available to you as well, if you would love to share that to other people as well.
Please also rate Tyson's mustache. It's really good, and I feel like it needs a rating.
I hope everyone heard that one. Big shout out for Tyson's moustache. It's awesome. There you go. It's getting 10 out of 10 in the chat. That's awesome. So this kind of conversation is really, really vital. We, as Steve said at the end, time is short, time is limited, and so we have to keep pushing for this. And we encourage you to kind of continue to share this message with other people around you as well. We can create an inclusive future right now, and it all starts with each of us. So thank you for joining us today. Apologies we ran over by about 4 minutes, but hope you enjoyed it, and come back again next month and we'll have another topic to tackle next month. Thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Everyone.
Thanks, folks.